This is ASMR News. Drift off, wake up, or simply relax with the world's biggest headlines. Anonymous sources now report that President Trump canceled a November 11th, 2018 visit to a military cemetery to honor American war heroes who died in France because he considered the Marines buried there suckers and losers, and because the stormy weather would muss his hair. November 11th, 1918, or Armistice Day, is the day World War I ended. At the time of the scheduled visit, according to the Atlantic magazine, the White House said the trip was canceled because the helicopter could not take off. However, the weather did not prevent French President Macron, German Chancellor Merkel, or Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau from visiting memorials that day. The story, first reported by the Atlantic magazine, has now been confirmed by Fox News, the Washington Post, and the Associated Press. In addition, the Washington Post reported that Trump also doesn't appear to understand why the military values finding soldiers missing in action. Reportedly, he told senior advisors those soldiers had performed poorly, gotten caught, and therefore deserved what they got. Trump first came under fire for statements concerning veterans in 2015, when he said that Vietnam veteran and Senator John McCain was a war hero because he was captured, and that I like people who weren't captured. McCain, shot down in combat in 1967, was tortured, but refused early release from the prison camp until every other prisoner captured before him was released. He was eventually repatriated after 5.5 years, along with 108 others. Trump has also called former President George Herbert Walker Bush a loser because he was shot down in combat in the Pacific in World War II. After Germany determined Kremlin opposition leader Alexei Navalny had been poisoned in Siberia, Chancellor Angela Merkel is facing mounting pressure over ties with Russia. Lawmakers have called for the government to reconsider the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would double natural gas imports to Germany directly from Russia. We must pursue hard politics, Norbert Röttgen, a senior member of Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, said Friday, adding that Germany should respond with the only language Russian President Vladimir Putin understands. That is gas sales, he said. India reported 86,000 new cases of COVID-19 on Saturday, crossing 4 million cases total, almost as many as Brazil, which has reported 4.1 million cases. The US leads the world with over 6.3 million reported cases. India has been adding more new coronavirus infections than any other country for nearly a month. While infections have plateaued in Mumbai, an initial hotspot, the virus is now spreading in rural areas where healthcare is limited. Scientists at the European Center for Disease Prevention warned of a potential second wave of COVID-19 as infections return to the peak levels seen in March. However, deaths are down from a daily average of about 4,000 in early April to around 300 at the start of September. In mid-August, the ECDC said the new infection clusters appeared in younger people who were venturing out into bars, restaurants, and other public places. But now the resurgence was also being seen among older demographics, indicating an increase in the transmission rate. Former Italian Prime Minister Berlusconi was admitted to the hospital with mild coronavirus symptoms and then tested positive. His representatives said there is no cause for concern over the 83-year-old's health. The U.S. will not participate in a global push to develop a COVID-19 vaccine because the effort is led by the World Health Organization, which President Trump has called corrupt and has accused of initially aiding China in covering up the scope of the pandemic. As a result, the U.S. is cutting itself off from the 170 countries in discussions to join the COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access Facility, or COVAX. The initiative is aimed at working with vaccine manufacturers to provide countries worldwide equitable access to safe and effective vaccines. The WHO is one of the co-leaders of the initiative. Johnson & Johnson reports that its potential vaccine prevented COVID-19 in a group of hamsters. The company vaccinated the animals with a single dose and then exposed them to the virus 4 weeks later. It said the vaccine created antibodies, which are necessary to build immunity to the virus. Vaccinated hamsters also lost weight more than unvaccinated hamsters and experienced less severe clinical disease, such as pneumonia or mortality. The Lancet, England's premier peer-reviewed medical journal, said early results from trials on 76 health volunteers aged from 18 to 60 of Russia's potential coronavirus vaccine show no major negative side effects. The study's authors wrote that 2 42-day trials, including 38 healthy adults each, did not find any serious adverse effects among participants and confirmed that the vaccine candidates elicit an antibody response. It cautioned that large long-term trials, including a placebo comparison and further monitoring, are needed to establish the long-term safety and effectiveness of the vaccine for preventing COVID-19 infection. Australian police arrested dozens during anti-lockdown protests attended by hundreds nationwide. Protests took place in Melbourne with about 300 demonstrators, as well as in Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth. Hong Kong police arrested 270 people on Sunday under suspicion of breaching unlawful assembly laws. Large crowds gathered at Yau Mai Te, protesting the postponement for at least a year of elections that were scheduled to be held on Sunday. A police officer has been killed and another wounded in a knife attack in the coastal resort of Sousse in Tunisia. 3 assailants were shot dead after the incident, which is being described as a terrorist attack. The latest incident comes 2 days after a new government was sworn in. In 2015, Sousse was the scene of one of Tunisia's worst attacks, when 38 people, most of them British tourists, were killed by a gunman. France will inject 100 billion euros, about 4% of its gross domestic product or GDP, into its economy to help repair the economic damage caused by coronavirus. The stimulus would include big spending on green energy and transport. Dubbed France Relaunch, it is aimed at reversing rising unemployment and includes tax cuts for businesses. The French economy shrank by 13.8% between April and June, the biggest quarterly fall since the Second World War. Rescue workers resumed searching in a Beirut building that collapsed a month ago in the blast, hoping to find a survivor under the rubble after a sensor detected breathing and heat. Iran now has more than 10 times the amount of enriched uranium permitted under an international agreement, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. The finding comes after Iran gave IAEA inspectors access to one of the two suspected former nuclear sites. Last year, Iran began deliberately and publicly reneging on commitments it had made under the International Nuclear Accord, signed in 2015 by Iran, China, France, Germany, Russia, the UK, and the US. This included the production of more enriched uranium than it was allowed, although only at enrichment levels far below that required for use in atomic weapons. Iran insists its nuclear program is exclusively for peaceful purposes. A man charged with running a drug syndicate was offered a plea deal in July if he would name Breonna Taylor, the 26-year-old black woman who had been killed by police in her Kentucky home. Taylor was shot dead on March 13th by white Louisville Metro police officers who had broken into her apartment at night using a no-knock warrant. Her death has led to nationwide protests against police brutality. The purpose of the raid on Taylor's home was to find evidence linking her to an ex-boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, a convicted felon with a history of drug trafficking, according to court documents. However, the police didn't find anything. A car drove through a group of demonstrators in New York City's Times Square on Thursday night. The New York City Police Department is investigating the incident, but says no injuries have been reported. The protesters were gathered following the release of a video showing the death of Daniel Prude, a black man who suffocated after being restrained by police in Rochester, New York. George Washington University canceled classes said to be taught by Jessica Krug, a professor who claimed to be black when in fact she was a white Jewish woman from suburban Kansas City. GWU also suspended Krug pending further investigation. Krug wrote in a blog post that she was white despite having lived most of her adult life, quote-unquote, under various assumed identities within a blackness that I had no right to claim. First North African blackness, then US-rooted blackness, then Caribbean-rooted Bronx blackness. A new Mississippi state flag design was chosen to replace the old flag, which contained the Confederate battle emblem. The new flag contains a magnolia emblem, a symbol long used to represent our state and the hospitality of our citizens, according to the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. The new magnolia also represents Mississippi's sense of hope and rebirth, as the magnolia often blooms more than once and has a long blooming season. The new magnolia is sleek and updated to represent the forward progression of Mississippi, according to the department. The new magnolia flag will go before voters in November for approval. The State Department named its third acting inspector general in less than 4 months to take on the position following the removal of its long-serving watchdog, Steve Linick, in May. Linick told Congress in early June that Undersecretary of Management Brian Buletow had tried to bully him into dropping an investigation into an $8 billion emergency arms sale to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The emergency arms sale was one of 5 open investigations by Linick involving the Office of the Secretary, including alleged misuse of State Department resources. The new acting Inspector General is Matthew Klimau, who, prior to becoming ambassador to Turkmenistan, was a senior advisor to Buletow. Linick's removal from the office tasked with investigating allegations of wrongdoing, waste, and abuse remains the focus of an ongoing congressional probe. Niger's National Human Rights Commission has accused the army of executing dozens of civilians during counterinsurgency operations after discovering more than 70 bodies in mass graves. The killings allegedly happened earlier this year. International rights groups have accused the armies of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso of carrying out dozens of extrajudicial executions during campaigns against jihadists and other armed groups in the Sahel region. Pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Thailand urged moviegoers to boycott Disney's live-action remake of Mulan after lead actress Liu Yifei shared a post supporting Hong Kong police. "I also support Hong Kong police. You can beat me up now," the China-born American actress wrote in Mandarin. "What a shame for Hong Kong," she added in English. Liu was apparently referencing the brutality of protesters after a widely televised incident went viral of a mainland Chinese journalist being assaulted at a Hong Kong airport. But her comments prompted an angry backlash from pro-democracy activists who have repeatedly accused police in the region of using excessive force. Six young Portuguese activists, aged between 12 and 21, launched a European human rights case against 33 countries in the latest legal effort to force governments to step up their fight against climate change. The group asked the European Court of Human Rights to hold the countries accountable for their allegedly inadequate efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions, arguing that failures to address climate change constitute a threat to their physical and mental well-being, violating their rights to life and respect for their families. Countries named in the complaint include the 27 member nations of the European Union, plus the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Norway, Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine. The truckers and transportation companies that bring food and medicine into Britain say the country is not prepared for the end of free trade with the European Union, which could mean severe disruption to supplies. The industry is still in the dark about IT systems that will be used for customs declarations when Britain severs its remaining ties to the as changes to infrastructure at the border. In addition, there are concerns about whether the UK will have enough customs agents to process paperwork. A third man has been found floating in a life raft in the waters off Japan after a cargo ship with 43 people and almost 6,000 cows aboard went missing Wednesday during Typhoon Maysak. He was taken to a hospital where he is now walking and talking. The first was rescued late Wednesday and was reported in good condition after more than half a day in the water. A second crew member was found floating unconscious on Friday morning and was taken to a hospital where he later died. North Korea will punish local officials over a typhoon that hit the eastern coast on Wednesday for failing to follow orders given by the ruling party. A Workers' Party newspaper blamed authorities in the coastal city of Wonsan for failing to prepare for Typhoon Maysak and accused them of having an irresponsible attitude. The paper did not say how many were missing, injured, or dead, but said there were dozens of casualties. Firefighting crews from Sri Lanka and India are trying to put out a fire aboard an oil tanker carrying 270,000 tons of crude oil that has been burning since Thursday off the coast of Sri Lanka. The fire started when a boiler in the main engine room exploded, causing the fire and killing one crew member. All other persons on board, 22 in all, were rescued. The Sri Lankan Navy stated that currently the fire has had no effect on the oil stored on board, and necessary steps are being taken to prevent the fire from spreading to those crude oil storage facilities. There is still no risk of the ship leaking oil into the ocean, the statement said. For the third time in 100 years, a blue whale has been spotted off the coast of Australia. Blue whales, the largest animals on Earth, are rarely seen close to the shore. Observers estimate the whale may have been more than 25 meters, or 82 feet in length, and weighed more than 100 tons, or 100,000 kilograms. The world's loneliest elephant will be transferred from its Pakistani zoo to better conditions in Cambodia after outcries from animal rights groups around the world. The elephant, named Kavan, has languished at a zoo in the Pakistani capital of Islamabad for more than 35 years and has suffered from loneliness after losing his partner in 2012. Kavan has been forced to live a solitary life in a small enclosure, and a medical exam shows he has suffered from malnutrition. Pakistan's High Court ordered the Margasar Zoo closed in May because of its abysmal conditions and systemic negligence. Lego said Wednesday that sales jumped 14% in the first half of 2020 compared to the same period last year as a result of investment in increased e-commerce capabilities. Game makers have been on a tear as social distancing restrictions encourage many people to find new ways to pass the time. Nintendo's operating profit surged 428% in its most recent quarter as the Switch console and Animal Crossing continued to drive sales. Facebook will prevent a French man suffering from an incurable condition from live streaming his own death. Alain Coq, 57, planned to broadcast his final days allow portrayals of suicide. Although we respect Monsieur Coq's decision to want to draw attention to this complex question, following expert advice, we have taken measures to prevent the live broadcast on Alain's account. A Facebook spokesman said, "Our rules do not allow us to show suicide attempts." President Emmanuel Macron had earlier denied his request for euthanasia. Some groups, including the Catholic Church, oppose euthanasia on moral grounds. Monsieur Coq wants the law changed in France to allow terminally ill people to die as they wish. Mackenzie Scott is now the wealthiest woman in the world. The ex-wife of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, Scott's net worth is now $68 billion, passing L'Oreal heiress Françoise Bencourt-Myers. Scott received a quarter of Bezos' Amazon shares in the couple's divorce settlement in 2019, worth $35 billion at the time. She is now the 12th wealthiest person in the world. First ballot Hall of Fame pitcher Tom Seaver has died of Lewy body dementia and COVID-19. Tom Terrific, as he was known, was the National League Rookie of the Year when he joined the New York Mets in 1967, and one of the leaders of the 1969 World Series winners when they became known as the Amazing Mets or as the Miracle Mets. Prior to that year, the best the team had ever finished was 9th in a 10-team league. Seaver was a 5-time 20-game and 3-time National League Cy Young Award winner. The Cy Young Award is given to the best pitcher in the league. For his career, from 1967 to 86, he had a 311 to 205 win-loss record with a 2.8 earned run average, 3,640 strikeouts, and 61 shutouts. Chelsea signed attacking midfielder Kai Havertz from Bayer Leverkusen for 5 years in a contract worth £71 million, or about $94 million US. He is the second most expensive signing after Kepa Arrizabalaga, transferred from Athletic Bilbao for £71 million in 2018. The Germany international has scored 36 goals with 25 assists for the Bundesliga club. Lionel Messi will stay at Barcelona after attempting to end his contract unilaterally on August 25th. He argued on Friday that he had exercised a clause that enabled him to leave without financial penalty at the end of each season. However, Barcelona has said that the exit clause expired in June and that Messi's deal, which runs until 2021, is still valid. They claimed that if Messi wanted to leave, he or his next club would have to pay his €700 million release clause or face legal action. La Liga backed up Barca's position, saying that they would not process Messi's transfer unless his buyout clause was paid. Pierre Gasly of Red Bull's AlphaTauri team won the Italian Grand Prix after Lewis Hamilton was penalized for being called to a stop when the pit lane was closed. McLaren's Carlos Sainz finished second, while Hamilton battled back from last place to finish 7th. Authentic upset Tis the Law to win the 146th running of the Kentucky Derby on Saturday at Churchill Downs. Authentic led from start to finish and won by by 1¼ lengths, covering the 1¼ mile race in 2 minutes and 61 milliseconds, the 7th fastest time ever in the Derby. After 9 stages of the Tour de France, Slovenian Primož Roglic of Team Jumbo-Visma holds a 21-second lead, and the yellow jersey over Colombian Egan Bernal of Team Ineos Grenadiers. Fellow Slovak Peter Sagan of Team Bora Hansgrohe holds the green jersey in the points competition. Frenchman Benoit Cosnefroy of Team AG Desert Mondial holds the polka dot jersey for the best climber. This year's tour consists of 21 stages over 3,484 kilometers and will end on September 20th. This is AS